Chris Boutte is a rather infamous figure within the drama, commentary and tea communities of YouTube. Although he has a relatively small following compared to others, the controversy surrounding his Rewired Soul brand has seemed to garner quite a lot of attention, mainly because of the topics he explores and how the information is presented. He rose to prominence in December of 2018 due to his video covering Illumination's experience with her ex-boyfriend. The video received positive attention and was a catalyst that kickstarted his YouTube career, going from 40,000 subscribers to a peak of 101,815 on February 14th, 2019. However, this growth ended just as it started to begin. And after a tumultuous series of critical videos over the space of 2 or so months, his channel has since declined into a memory of what it once was. It's been over half a year since the outrage that faced Chris, and in this time, you would have expected him to conduct some sort of restoration project to rebuild his image and credibility within the community, and somewhat grow from the criticism he received. However, instead of acknowledging the criticism, he became defensive and turned what was a simple critique of his content into a series of mistakes in which he was exposed. He believes his downfall was unjust, that what he did was not worthy of the attention he received. It's evident in the book he wrote about this experience, which we will get to in this video, that he holds himself accountable for being cancelled because of the stupid things he did, but doesn't take accountability for what he was criticised for, arguably being the reason why his reputation is still in ruins. There's a strong sense of victimhood within his recounts, and it misses the true idea of the current phenomena of cancel culture by trying to relate his exposure to criticism with people who had genuinely been struck by unjust accusation and outrage. Chris likes to hide behind the idea of him being cancelled, and in turn believes he is among the likes of James Charles, Pro Jared and Slazo. His situation differs rather dramatically, and we're going to discuss why he is not a casualty of cancel culture, but more or less a casualty of his own self-righteousness and ego. The book he wrote, Cancelled, provides further context into his ways of thinking, but also shows an inability to identify why people don't like him, and also shows up his naivety. I had to read the entire thing to be able to make any sort of analysis of it, so I'm quite surprised I still have enough brain cells to even have the ability to talk about this. What I can assure you is you'll need to grab some sort of beverage and maybe even a snack or two for this one, and find somewhere comfy to sit. Somehow this really cold cup of tea has magically reheated again, and it's now piping hot. So ladies and gentlemen, join me on this journey as we take a look at why Chris Boutte of the Rewired Soul was not cancelled, and also take a look at how his actions then and now are the sole, pun intended, reason why people so easily turned at him, and also still continue to dislike his online personality. Let's spill this shit. For many of you regular visitors to the BWC channel, you've become accustomed to me not only covering current topics, but also revisiting ones from the past to try and understand how they happened and why, as well as taking a look at where we're at now with the issue. The Rewired Soul saga is one that really interests me because of the fact it doesn't feel like it has really concluded. Instead, it feels like there's a bit of feud still underlying what went down earlier this year, and it's observably more apparent from Chris. With the situation he is in, I can understand the resentment he would hold towards the people he views as the ones who brought a premature end to his blossoming YouTube career. And this will be very clear as we start getting deeper into the reasons for his sustained decline. But where do we start? To keep this video a respectable length, I will briefly outline the events from Primink's initial video on Chris up to his most recent one. Primink, a commentary YouTuber, is a key figurehead in this story and was also a heavy focus in Chris's poorly written book Cancelled, so it is natural he is one of the main protagonists or antagonists. But we'll center the timeline of events around Primink's published videos because I don't want to go insane and you don't want to be sitting there for 2 hours whilst I waffle on about every intricate detail of the not so graceful fall of Chris Boutte. The first video by Primink was arguably the least critical or damning out of every video made on Chris in terms of the critique presented, but in all fairness, it was effective in planting a seed for which future arguments could be made. The main critique presented by Primink was of Chris's use of drama as a way of gaining views to platform mental health theory, which is delivered in a manner making Chris appear to be some sort of expert on the topic of psychology. However, he is not a qualified person in the field of psychology. The point made by Primink was that Chris's devotion to spreading mental health awareness was fine, but after realizing drama generates views, his channel shifted more towards covering the trends and using mental health theory as a way of contributing something different. Once you start singling out certain individuals and using them as examples for your theory, then it becomes an issue of ethics when you're dealing with psychology and mental health. This is the implication I get from Primink's commentary. Talking about mental health is good, but using people who exhibit personal issues and then using them to propose some sort of solution to their supposed problem is not. Primink's video did reasonably well, but it didn't necessarily do any damage because it was simply criticism designed to highlight certain issues with the Rewired Soul channel. Chris, on the other hand, didn't see it this way and decided to impulsively make a response video to Primink's criticism and managed to initiate his own downfall by not understanding what the criticism was. A common trend with Chris is his impulsivity with responding, but not learning from the backlash he receives from the ways in which he responds. As response videos go, it was pretty shit. In fact, I was able to take apart the entire thing in detail, which could be covered in a separate video, but I'll summarize where he went wrong in dealing with Primink's initial criticism. One tip for Chris would be to make sure you don't conform to the criticism in your response whilst you're trying to reject the criticism, because it not only makes you look like an utter idiot, but also kind of makes the criticism a lot stronger. Early in Chris's video, he decides to brand Primink as being ignorant due to a lack of research, which is the common narrative Chris has adopted in his response. By pointing out certain comments made by Primink, he presents a somewhat convincing argument where Primink has made definitive points based on assumptions rather than evidence. However, this is not addressing the criticism, but more or less deflecting the attention away from it and presenting an argument against Primink rather than the critique. In Primink's second video, which we will take a peek at soon, he observes this flaw in the response and pretty much capitalizes on, ironically, the ignorance of Chris. He focused too much on individual comments rather than the actual argument being made and took them out of context to try and invalidate what Primink had to say. In doing this, it opened up a big can of worms Chris definitely did not want to open, and it seems his ignorance is what fueled his eventual downfall. Again, ironic. Primink's second video came out a month later. Yes, that's right. In the space of a month, Chris managed to implode and completely fuck everything up. That's putting it lightly. In this time, not only did fellow mental health channels start releasing critical videos on Chris, so too did some tea channels and everyone else followed suit. But hey, didn't Chris say that Primink's video was poorly researched and based on a lack of factual evidence? Isn't Primink just an ignorant kid? So how are so many people from all around the place making essentially the same critique of Chris and his conduct? Oh, because Primink's criticism was valid and is obviously a shared belief amongst many people. And we're only getting started. The month of drama was very confusing to say the least, and is probably one of the main reasons why I didn't actually cover it at the time. But what I do know is Chris was exposed, and he definitely did not know how to handle himself. Now, Chris can talk. He's very good at talking. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's good at saying the right things, and this is essentially the whole reason why his channel decided to fall off a cliff. The seed for criticism was already in place. The original narrative, if you'd like, was pretty much entrenched in the discourse surrounding Chris's channel. What Chris did was add fuel to a smoldering fire because he failed to realize that he was in the spotlight and everything he said and did was being observed. He ignorantly gave people who hold other people accountable material that would incriminate him based on the current narrative set in place by Primink's original critique. Chris got exposed, and he got exposed hard. What you start to notice in the commentary and drama communities is that the audience hates it when you lie to them, and they hate it especially when YouTubers try to manipulate them. The formula for most drama is the same, and it unfolds because someone either lied or they did something to manipulate the perception of the people that support them. In terms of Chris, everything he said that he wasn't turned out to be a lie. And to get his way out of the mess he'd got himself into, he tried to manipulate the situation and everyone involved. This also backfired.
If you want my bet, I think he was hoping that the livestream response would serve as his reasonable reply before being able to turn it onto his detractors in the follow-up. But his livestream had so much non-information that it was impossible to create a coherent message, so people were still waiting on a natural response. And so when he dropped this disaster, it was so out of left field in many ways, clickbaited as an apology to Trisha Paytas, and then thrown in with this ludicrous bait and switch, that people were just not on board, and they shouldn't have been. It showed Chris up as being incredibly manipulative.
I love that man so much. This was pretty much the end of the month of drama, the final nail in the coffin, the nice bow to tie up the mess that was the downfall of the Rewired Soul. Everything was aired, and the result of this drama cycle was a loss of credibility for the Rewired Soul and maybe the loss of a positive source of revenue. This was not the fault of the people who did their jobs, but solely the fault of Chris for not addressing the criticism in any shape or form whatsoever. If he had done such a thing, he wouldn't have found himself in the situation he was in, but afterwards, he was left with a lot of advice to take in. There were so many points made and suggestions to be heard that it seems impossible that he wouldn't take that on board and improve his channel. Instead of taking note of the criticism and addressing it, he decided to double down on being the victim, releasing a 200+ word recount of his so-called cancellation and how he was somehow misrepresented by the mob. Okay, Chris. So I did actually read the book, and to say the least, it was not enjoyable. Look, I'm a little bit biased because I'm a university student and I'm expected to read and write at a certain level, and this felt like a trip back to early high school years. And that's just the writing. As narratives go, it can be easily identified as Chris Boutte is the victim. He did some stupid things that he deeply regrets, but he doesn't feel the negative attention he received was justified. He's really just a good guy who's trying to spread the word about mental health, and people are stopping him because facts don't matter. This book is disguised as a way of trying to explain cancel culture, but it's actually his way of trying to justify why he received criticism. Not because he was doing something people found wrong, but because people just believed the misinformation. So, let's have a look at this book. Let's begin with Chapter 8, which tries to explain cancel culture by linking it to the BetterHelp scandal which occurred during Shane Dawson's Jake Paul documentary series, as well as other creators who Chris believes were cancelled. This paragraph doesn't explain cancel culture. Instead, it tries to link the backlash that faced BetterHelp, as well as creators like Gabby Hanna, to an idea Chris is trying to form to fit his own personal story. What this chapter is really discussing is outrage. Not cancel culture, but the tendency for YouTube creators and audiences to put pressure on those with power to essentially take account for what they did. This happens everywhere. This is something a part of society. It's no special phenomenon that only happens on YouTube. It happens in politics, happens in economics, it even happens to KFC. Even the rules Chris made don't fit what cancel culture actually constitutes. Rule 1. Say all the creators care about is money. Rule 2. Create the narrative that these creators are filthy rich. Before we go on, let's explain cancel culture as concisely as possible, because the idea of cancel culture has been thrown around without a solid definition over the past year. Cancel culture is just a cute little name we've given to branding someone guilty before being proven innocent. Kind of a play on the US judicial system. There's no real starting point for this culture because it's been a thing in society for a long time. A popular historical example of this is the Salem witch trials, where people in early 1690s Massachusetts were trialed for witchcraft based on false accusations. We are a truly stupid species. It was known as the deadliest witch hunt in the history of colonial America. Can we start to see some similarities forming already? A trend we've seen over the past 2 or 3 years is the rise of the Me Too movement, where women speak up about men who have sexually abused them and remained untouched by the law because the women were afraid to speak out or were ignored. In theory, it was great. Women were finally able to speak up about their abuse and get justice for the maltreatment they received. But the problem with this has become very clear, especially this year. And this idea that a voice must not left be unheard has been capitalized on by a lot of bad actors. These people have ruined this movement for the actual victims and are the reason why we need to be careful with accusing people of a crime without any due legal proceedings. This year on YouTube alone, we have seen so many unsubstantiated accusations such as rape, sexual predation, and the grooming of underage fans, which have resulted in the accused being publicly dismantled and essentially sentenced to career death. However, each one of these creators was able to provide evidence that these claims were unjustified and lacking in authenticity.
Vindication!
The word of 2019. The creators vindicated themselves from these false allegations and were able to somewhat recover from the abuse and unjust witch hunt-esque treatment they received. This is exactly what cancel culture looks like. It's not just outrage, it's blatant defamation combined with the image of delivering justice without the justice. There's definitely a difference to what Chris has labelled cancel culture and the actual function of this cancel culture. From what we saw during the month he received the most backlash, he likes to twist ideas to fit whatever narrative he wants to convey. Whether it's ignoring the actual points made against him, or even in this book, there's a theme that people who have caused outrage are the eventual victims of the accountability. It's just manipulation. Using cancelled as a buzzword skews the lines between false accusations and accountability to comply with this idea of how he faced public outrage. For example, in this chapter, one of the main reasons cancel culture and mob mentality on the internet exists is because of channels that only exist to stir the pot. Here we see the idea that was presented by the right opinion before, changing the spotlight from Chris onto the creators that only exist to cause problems. The narrative about me was that I shielded myself with mental health, even though that wasn't true. The truth is, the channels that make nothing but hit pieces actually do shield themselves by creating a narrative for saying, we're just keeping people accountable. When you watch the people who run these channels interact on Twitter or have a conversation, you learn who they really are. Most of them are angry people who just want to watch the world burn. This book is supposedly about cancel culture, but it seems to be more about shining a light on the people who produce critical content on other people, simply because Chris was one of those people. Instead of trying to make an argument for what accountability should look like, the focus is on discrediting those who hold people accountable, because Chris knows it's so much easier to make an argument when it's against someone who lacks credibility, especially those who just want to watch the world burn. The problem is Chris is the one who created a narrative that he shields himself behind mental health, not the people criticizing him. They just presented ideas and facts that reinforce this narrative, because if he can't get views, people can't be helped with their mental health, shown in his response to Primink's comment on the Repzilla video.
I almost applaud Chris for what he's done. He's managed to create a drama channel that is basically immune to criticism, because if you criticize him or his channel, the defense from him and his fans will always be, oh, you don't support my channel? That means you don't support mental health. You're a bad person. It's almost genius. It's clever.
This perfectly sets us up for chapter 9, which is of course about his experience with Primink, where you'll start to see the walls cave in spectacularly. The recurring theme, I guess, for this video is that Chris just doesn't understand how to analyze arguments, which is why every response he has ever made has been an utter train wreck. I watched it, and it was filled with so much misinformation and speculation. He hadn't done his research at all either. He just didn't like me, had a vendetta against me, and wanted to take me down. It's just not true though. There was no misinformation whatsoever. There was no speculation. The points made were that Chris uses drama as a way of getting views. He speculates on other people's private issues and uses that as a topic for mental health discussion. He's not a psychologist or licensed in any way to give mental health advice, and he does make money from doing this. These are all factual, there's no misinformation within the points, and they all combine to form the critique Primink had of the Rewired Soul. It's a drama channel that uses mental health as a topic of commentary, which has some unethical practices. It's only misinformation and speculation because Chris didn't agree with it, and that is the reason why his response and every subsequent response were utter shite. Primink's final video was a response to this book, and well, this sums it up pretty well.
Chris goes on to talk about the comments that we had interacted with, and it's what started the conflict between him and me. Basically, I left a comment saying I didn't agree with what he was doing, and he responded very manipulatively. He tried implying me telling him not to talk about other people's mental health if they don't want you to was like me not telling a friend to get therapy if they were depressed.
That's pretty dangerous, man.
In Chris's book, though, he glosses over this interaction saying he doesn't recall it that well, but the comments are on 50 different videos, including including my original video. So if he wanted to refresh his memory, he could have easily done that, but he's not showing the comments because it makes him look really bad, which is ironic when this entire book is about how cancel culture doesn't care about the facts, and he's blatantly leaving out one of the most important facts.
Oopsie doopsie. If only Chris had done his research. He wasn't cancelled. He wasn't accused of any deplorable crime. He was simply criticised for being unethical and not being able to accept or even acknowledge the criticism. The mob, which attacked him, wasn't real. It was just the reality of his own actions which drove people away with his credibility and his reputation. For him to consider himself among the ranks of the cancelled class of 2019 is quite egotistical and also invalid. Trying to pin the blame onto Primink, trying to suggest people were spreading false information about him, and also passive-aggressively suggesting people betrayed and abandoned him is cowardly. He's a man who says he can handle himself, but in reality, he just deflects whatever he can, and that is why his decline has been so consistent.
Who do I need to, please, the creator or the...
Well, people don't do this. That's the problem. That's the problem with you little fuckers. Most of these mental health YouTubers cover wide varieties of topics and get a lot of views the normal way. But when you take YouTube drama and mix it in there, you now have to balance the two. You have to think about not only the audience who's consuming your content, but you also have to think about the person whose life you're invading to make
Nick,
this content.
You don't think
you could say everything is public, but it's not. Not everything is public.
Nick, okay, let's have a personal, vulnerable conversation real quick. You don't think the video you made about me has affected me, and you don't think as somebody who is, in your words, and maybe not as vulnerable, but in a vulnerable stage, right? Like, I'm a recovering drug addict who lives in Las Vegas. You making a video about me, how dangerous is that?
Why the fuck would I care, though? I'm not a mental health professional.
Oh, shit! There we go.
Yeah, there it is.
But
I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not thinking of everybody's well-being. I'm making a YouTube video on a guy who called me out as a response. If you're going to take that the wrong way, that's your fault. You called me out. You put my name in that description. I'm not thinking of your mental health. I'm not thinking of where you've been or where you'll go. I'm thinking you said this and I'm responding.
And
on the other hand, you're a fucking...
That's our common
ground.
You're
an armchair therapist.
You're fucking damn right I am. I'm not a licensed therapist. I've never claimed to be one. And if you have a clip to give Augie, because I gave you some research to do where I say I am one, no, I am an armchair fucking therapist for right now. All right? But you and I are in the same boat. You said the second I did what I did, you stopped giving a fuck about my mental health. The second people like Trisha Paytas showed an abusive relationship, I stopped giving a shit about her mental health. The second that Taylor Nicole Dean showed people that she was fucking somebody in rehab, I stopped caring about how it affected her because I cared more about how it affected the audience.
This was from the After Hours debate Chris had in August with Nicholas Diorio, where they battled it out over Chris's take on Nick and a few other people holding I'm Alex accountable for the false allegations made against Slazo. As you can see in the dumpster fire of a clip, the lack of self-awareness possessed by Chris is rather disturbing. He's a mental health channel, he's a mental health advocate, but he's publicly stating that he does not give a fuck about the mental health of the people he is talking about. Isn't the whole point of destigmatizing mental health to help more people come out and seek help regarding issues concerning their mental health? So disregarding the mental health of the person whose mental health he is analyzing is setting a very bad example for how we talk about mental health. This is the exact same thing he was criticized for earlier in the year, and just a reason why he has little to no credibility left at all. Hurting a person's mental health by dissecting their mental health and telling people how they shouldn't enable these people in an attempt to get views is fucked up, and it's unethical. He addressed the backlash he received from his interaction with Taylor Nicole Dean's addiction recovery in his book. When she made her video about me, and I started getting a ton of hate again, I had enough. I finally made a video called Unsubscribe from the Rewired Soul, and it was the most empowering thing I've done in a long time. In the video, I told people that if they don't like me or how I operate, they can leave. I've spent way too much time and energy worried about everything I say or do. I realize that each creator who made video about me is doing the same things as I am.
No, they aren't. This is one of the biggest issues I have with Chris, and it's the inability for him to self-reflect on his content, the criticism he received, and why he is constantly being criticized.
Drama channels, tea channels, and commentary channels have a clear ethos, and that is to talk about issues within YouTube and internet culture and hold the people who do things that affect other people accountable. Chris, on the other hand, wants to raise awareness about mental health and help people. He isn't holding people accountable, he's using them to platform mental health theory at the expense of their mental health. There is a clear and obvious lack of ethics in this practice, which is why people are so against the content he makes. It's disingenuous to compare calling people out on things they shouldn't be doing with discussing someone's personal and private health issues because he thinks it's his responsibility to teach the audience by making an example of the person whose mental health he is dissecting. I also realized that the hate comments are coming from people who are obsessed with drama channels. I explained that the difference between my channel and theirs is that I don't want you to just get filled in on the drama happening in the world, but I also want you to learn something.
There are clear lines to be drawn. What Chris teaches is not equivalent to the message that is being delivered. And what conclusions he draws from what people select to post online is widely drawn from speculation regarding the treatment they are receiving.
In the book, he was confused as to why people were ignoring the positive videos he made about her and only focused on the one where he was critical of her. He blames it on cancel culture. However, the reality is people don't respect it when you do something you've been criticized for and don't attempt to make any sort of change about it. He made multiple videos about this girl. He then decided to assume authority and tell her audience that they shouldn't enable her based on the assumption that he has experienced this and knows how it works. He doesn't have the inside knowledge to know what's going on behind the scenes, which is why people are continually fed up by his armchair analysis of a person's mental health, because he is just speculating upon what they present through curated posts and not by actually being there or even talking to the person before making an analysis.
It's different from holding someone accountable for their actions by analysing what they have done. Criticising them based on their private mental health situation is not holding them accountable. It's being a dick, especially when they haven't been able to talk about their own situation and explain what's happening with their own experience.
This is why his videos on Illumination were well received, because he wasn't speculating on her mental health and experiences, but discussing how what she had explained tied to the mental health theory he discussed. The clear and obvious solution to Chris's problem would be to stop encroaching onto a person's personal affairs before they have decided to share their own story. Using the drama formula is just not an ethical solution to spread mental health awareness, and if he just focused on exploring mental health representation in the media, and even just stories presented by YouTubers, he may actually find that people won't be so critical of him. I spoke to Dr. John Grohl, who is the founder of Psych Central, one of the oldest online mental health resource sites, and this is the critique he had of how Chris ran his channel. I don't believe it's ethical for anyone, professional or non-professional, to go around and analysing another person's mental health or attempt to do armchair, layperson diagnosis on people they've never met. But I think this is especially dangerous from a layperson who doesn't really have the training or experience to make such pronouncements with any authority. It's easy to dehumanize others when analysing them in this manner, and I'm not sure enough is done to look at them respectfully as a fellow human being who is also working through their own challenges a person analysing them may know nothing about. I find it problematic to talk about other people's mental health from afar in general, no matter what the medium, nor the person doing the commenting. People base those opinions simply on the YouTube personality they've chosen to share with the world, which may or may not reflect that person's actual personality or mental health makeup. I think one is best off talking about mental health concerns without using a specific person as an example. If I have actual concern about another influencer online, the only legit way of helping them is to reach out to them privately, if possible, to offer help or to talk. And that usually only works for people we know online, not complete strangers. I would never imagine I was helping someone by publicly calling them out in a video or article.
As we saw before, Chris states that he doesn't give a fuck about the mental health of the person he is analysing, and he alleges his responsibility is to the audience. But by doing that, it just sets a terrible precedent
for how we talk about mental health, and it could also further discourage other creators from seeking help because they don't want people invading on their private health issues. So really, why not just build on making better, well-rounded content, actually pulling examples from the media and linking it with studies in more structured videos? You can pull in trending topics and build an audience that isn't generated from people who just want the latest drama gossip. For this to really work, Chris needs to work on his attitude and how he presents himself to the public, because recently, he's gone and really made a fool of himself. So let's talk about where he's at now. Over a month ago, Chris released a few very questionable videos highlighting a desire for attention, a grab at some relevance since nobody really talks about him anymore. The first video that caught my attention was titled, "How I Made Primink Filthy Rich."
You can have your disagreements about the Rewired Soul in this video, but not when you clip something and edit it to fit your narrative. I would say this for any channel or piece of writing ever published. This is just how fake news spreads online because no one fact checks. Another prime example of that is Primink, okay? He made a video about my book and it has over 300,000 views. Not only did he clearly not read my book, but I've had less than 1,300 downloads. So he had 300,000 views. I had less than 1,300 downloads. You know what that means? That means only 0.43% of the people who saw his video, if we're lucky, actually read my book. So again, we live in a time where people would rather watch videos than read books and do their own investigating. They would rather just watch a video and trust this kid and everything he's saying is true and not taken out of context.
This makes Chris come off as being very spiteful. He, first of all, makes the baseless accusation that Primink did not read his book, which is provided without evidence, again discrediting the person who is criticizing him. He then goes on to complain that Primink's video got many more views than his book did downloads, offering the point that he made very little money off the book as well. He also claims that Primink was taking what he said out of context without actually providing the points where he did, and best of all, this is why he thinks Primink made the video.
So what's his motivation? I'm not sure, but I have a theory that it has something to do with money. So my average CPM rate is $7.62. All right, those of you non-YouTubers who don't understand how CPM works, CPM stands for cost per mil, okay? So I make $7.62 for every 1,000 views I get, all right? And as you can see from my recent videos, I ain't making that much money off of YouTube. So how much has Primink made off of videos about me? So, like I said, my average CPM is $7.62. Let's be conservative here and let's estimate that Primink makes $5 CPM. So every 1,000 views he gets, he makes $5. So even though he says I stalk him, he has 4 videos about me that add up to a total of 1.89 million views, all right? If he's making even $5 per 1,000 views, he's made almost $10,000 off of me. To put that in perspective a little bit more, although I'm labeled as the stalker, I made 1 video about him, and as you can see from my analytics, I only made $64.67.
Let's go back to Christopher's rules about cancelling someone, and oh, look at that sweet irony. As well as this, he's also spreading misinformation in this video, something that goes against everything he stands for. A little fact check, CPM, cost per milli, is the cost per 1,000 advertisement playbacks, or in English, the amount of money you get every 1,000 times a person sees an advertisement on your video. It's not every 1,000 views. Not every view on YouTube is a monetized view because there are not enough advertisements to deliver to every viewer. Also, Primink definitely did not make $10,000 from his free, yes, Chris didn't do his research either, videos on him. For example, my sniper wolf video made around $5,000, and that was in December when the ad rates were at the highest. Primink's videos are from periods of lower advertisement rates and also have combined views less than my sniper wolf video. So he definitely did not make $10,000. That's just gross speculation. Again, something Chris complained Primink did in his book.
But anyways, there are 3 main takeaways from this video. 1, be an independent thinker. 2, do your own research. 3, make videos about me because you will make bank.
Very humble, Chris. You're really showing your true colors. The video on Primink shows us Chris's arrogance and ego, which has arguably been one of the main reasons he lost his image. I also think at the time he made these videos, he wasn't thinking straight because they definitely do not come off the way he wants them to, and they really push his reputation further down the drain. I would say a big identifier for this is the video he made on the right opinion, as it screams for some sort of attention and this need to stir the pot and bring up something he should just move on from. Now, the right opinion is not perfect. He's made mistakes in the past, as we all have, but to try and discredit him solely because he disagreed with you is just petty.
People look at the right opinion and you think of a very fact-based, research-based channel, yet the original video that Primink made about me, as well as his follow-up videos, were filled with so much misinformation. And I'm like, okay, but you're mentoring Primink and you're not gonna point out that he didn't do his research. If you wanna know what I'm talking about, I made a whole video debunking everything Primink said, but again, it doesn't matter because people believe what they want to believe.
Honestly, making this video has been so nauseating, like Chris just doesn't seem to get it. We've already discussed how Primink's video was a fair critique of the Rewired Soul, and there was no misinformation contained within the video, just criticism Chris doesn't like. Questioning the right opinion's integrity based solely on the fact Chris speculates he is mentoring Primink and that Tro doesn't see any issue with the criticism towards Chris is a load of bullshit, and it's really just a pointless argument to make. He's looking for attention. The video then moves on to his disagreement with Johnson's criticism of how Chris presented his mother to his audience, arguing that John spread a false narrative about her. It's not really the case, because what Johnson pointed out was that Chris's mother was not a licensed therapist, and Chris referring to her as a professional psychologist had implications that she was licensed, which she wasn't. John wasn't discrediting Chris's mother, but more or less pointing out where Chris was misleading his audience by presenting her as such, especially on his website where she was labeled a psychologist. They had a Twitter argument. Chris supposedly gave evidence to prove John wrong, and the right opinion told Chris that he should essentially be more transparent. This pissed him off.
Here's the response that he said that absolutely blew my mind and completely changed my opinion about him. And this isn't a direct quote, I'm doing this off of recollection, but he said something along the lines of, this is putting the burden of investigation on the audience. And I was just baffled, because here's how that translates to me. The way it translates to me is him saying, I think the audience is too dumb to know about this, so you gotta hold their hand and explain things in a very remedial way. And if not, you deserve people to spread false information about you. Like, think about that real quick. If he was the rational, logical person, right? And maybe that's just his opinion, but I completely disagree. Like, I can't imagine watching the news, like, for example, the Donald Trump impeachment has been going on and they keep throwing around the word quid pro quo or whatever it is, right? I didn't know what it was, still barely do, but I looked it up.
When it comes to making videos or even writing articles, and you include information that would be confusing to someone who doesn't have experience or knowledge of what you are talking about, you really need to explain it if you aren't giving it context. The main criticism John put on Chris was that there was no way of determining what a professional psychologist is because there is no information out there regarding the terminology. So, to someone who's not adept in the field of psychology, or the average viewer, they would assume Chris's mother has the authority to endorse what Chris says and make it appear to be more credible. If you aren't disclosing all of the relevant facts and leave out things that need clarifying, so someone has to go out of their way to find out what that is, you are not doing your job. You are being a lazy creator. Does Chris deserve misinformation spread about him? No. No one does. But there's no misinformation being spread. It's just criticism that he doesn't agree with. So it's ludicrous that he'd make a video discrediting the right opinion solely because of a couple of interactions that did not go in his favor. This is why he lost his credibility. Not because of misinformation, but because of his ignorance, naivety, and ego. Now, this video has been mostly negative because of the fact that what happened was negative, and a lot of it should have been dealt with better by Chris and arguably a few people from the audience. I'm sure most people would be happy if Chris moved on and rethought his approach to the Rewired Soul channel and worked on making better content. Sitting down and producing 1 or 2 videos a week is probably a lot better than trying to produce 3 videos per day. And it might give him time to really focus on what he's saying rather than him just waffling to get past the 10-minute mark. Until he does this, he will still continue to bleed subscribers, and he will not become a successful YouTuber, and more importantly, he won't be able to spread mental health awareness. Like with the theme of this video, it all comes back to what he does. No one is forcing him off the site, but they won't accept him if he doesn't address the areas that people have criticized. Again, it's all up to Chris to decide his public perception, and hopefully, in the coming months, he finds his way.